What's going on, UPC fans? I am Blue, and I am here today with the post-draft power ranking for the UPC, the first season of Gen 7. Obviously, I'm not here by myself. I'm here with my good buddy Eric to complete the power ranking.
Hey guys, we're here with the UPC post-draft power rankings. I'm very excited to get started. Really excited to get into Gen 7 league battles. They're really looking forward to them. There's a lot of interesting new Pokemon that people are excited to try out, and I'm happy to be here.
So yeah, we're both here to evaluate each team. We took time to evaluate every team, and we got the ranking number 1 to number 12. So we're going to start in order from number 12, 11, and 10.
Okay, so coming in at number 12, we have the Colorado Reggies. Their team is Tapu Fini, Buzzwole, Decidueye, Donphan, Alolan Ninetales, Beware, Turtonator, Primeape, Mega Lopunny, Alolan Golem, and Tangela.
So one thing we noticed about the Colorado Reggies was that he has like very, very redundant typing in mostly fighting. And that's unfortunate, putting a team with Tapu Fini at the 12 rank, because it's a really, really good Pokemon. But like, he didn't support the Tapu Fini very well. He has very, very redundant typing, and he doesn't have that good of a core. Like, his core is not that great, meaning that like his dragon is Tortonator, and does he even have a steel type? He doesn't even have a steel type to complete that core, and he doesn't have a good way to finish the fire, water, grass core with the same thing that. Oh wait, he does have a Decidueye, but still, Tortonator is not the best of picks. So those were two things that caught our eyes right away.
So obviously, having 4 fighting types in the form of Buzzwole, Beware, Primeape, and Mega Lopunny, with Beware and Mega Lopunny being the exact same typing. Obviously, they do different things. Like, Beware is more of a bulky physical attacker, while Mega Lopunny is more of a speedy physical attacker. They obviously do different things, but at the end of the day, it's still normal stab and still fighting stab. Having those 4 fighting types, this team has a massive weakness to Psychic and Flying and Fairy, while also picking up a slight weakness to Poison, a slight weakness to Fire, and a slight weakness to Ice as well. Just because, well, the Ice weakness is a little bit skewed, because one of those weaknesses is Tangela, and Tangela is definitely not a mon that comes every week. But at the end of the day, there's a lot of weaknesses on this team, and it's going to take a lot to patch up those weaknesses every week, and opposing coaches can very easily exploit those weaknesses. Something like Tapu Fini is a great Pokemon to build around. I just don't feel like this team supports Tapu Fini.
Yeah, one thing we noticed that was good on his team was that he had good hazard removal. He has Tapu Fini that gets the fog. He has Decidueye that gets the fog. They are both really, really good defoggers. He has Donphan that gets Rapid Spin, which is obviously a very, very good rapid spinner, and probably one of the best in Tier 3. But for the rest, like, he has bad speed on his team, even though he has a Mega Lopunny. And he doesn't have great hazard setters. So yes, he has defog. He won't be able to defog his own hazards because he doesn't have much to set hazards himself. So to complete the Colorado Reggies, it doesn't have an intimidating team to prep for. If I'm looking at it as an opponent perspective, I look at this team and I'm not too threatened. If I have good answers for Tapu Fini and Buzzwole and Mega Lopunny, you've pretty much dealt with the most threatening teams on this team. So it doesn't have that much of an intimidating team, and it doesn't have that great speed.
All right, moving on to number 11.
Yes, let's move on to number 11 with the Boston Beedrills. The Boston Beedrill has Mega Venusaur as their Mega, Cresselia, Ferrothorn, Zapdos, Primarina, Florges, Porygon 2, Ditto, Palossand, Rampardos, and Golurk.
So the very first thing we noticed about the Boston Beedrills team is that there's a lot of redundant typings. Like, for example, there's Mega Venusaur and Ferrothorn, and while those 2 grass types don't share any weaknesses, there's, at the end of the day, it's still 2 grass types. Like, not every team can utilize 2 grass types very well. He also has Primarina and Florges, which that's 2 fairy types right there, and Fairy is still one of the best typings in the game. But Primarina and Florges do very similar things in terms of the fact that they're both pretty specially bulky and they're both pretty specially offensive. Obviously, Primarina has a much better offensive move pool, but Florges has much better support capabilities, so that could be the logic there. And there's another redundant typing in the form of Palossand and Golurk, both of which are Ghost Ground typing. There's not really a reason to need Palossand and Golurk. I would honestly just consider having just one of those. Golurk, in my opinion, is a much better Mon just because of its access to Stealth Rocks. It's a little bit more bulkier. Palossand really is only known for its physical defense and its special offense. And Palossand has some really cool offensive moves, but at the end of the day, Palossand is just not one of the better Mons in the format. If Water Compaction made it immune to water, it would definitely be a lot better. But there's very redundant typings across a lot of these Pokemon.
Yes, it's also a very, very slow team. We can see that Mega Venusaur, Cresselia, Ferrothorn, Primarina, Florges, Porygon 2, Palossand, Rampardos, Golurk, they're all very, very, very slow. His fastest thing is Zapdos at base 100, which is not very fast at all. So that was one of the things we noticed as well. He also has bad hazard removal. Don't get me wrong, Zapdos is a great defogger, but that's pretty much the only thing he has for hazard removal. So it's not. You might want to run static to catch those static U-turns sometimes, and you're not going to be able to run defog. But Zapdos has a decent move pool, and it doesn't want to run defog every week. So that's also something we noticed. And he also doesn't have good hazard setting either. He has Golurk, Rampardos, and Ferrothorn. Ferrothorn is very good, but it's still very weak to fire. And Golurk is not something you bring every week either, so it doesn't have that good hazard setting. And we just looked at his team also from an opposing perspective, and he just loses to Steel type. Like a good Steel type, well played. There's nothing that the Boston Beetle can do to beat a good, well played Steel type. So that's also something that caught her.
One thing I do like about this team, though, is that it's incredibly bulky. You have the likes of Mega Venusaur and Cresselia and Ferrothorn and Zapdos as your first 4 picks, and those are incredibly bulky Pokemon that are really hard to break through. Really, the only things on his team that aren't known for being bulky are Ditto and Rampardos is just known for that massive attack stat, and Ditto is more of a gimmick Pokemon, which, I mean, technically can be bulky, but we're not here to talk about that. So if you can out bulk his bulk, or if you can out offense his bulk, you beat the Boston Beejos, and that's one of the huge flaws with this team.
Agreed, Eric. So let's move on to number 10 now with the Scarborough Staraptors.
So the Scarborough Staraptors lineup is Magearna, Hydreigon, Galvantula, Politoed, Mega Swampert, Beartick, Tornadus Therian, Silvally Ghost type, Weezing, Ludicolo, and Delphox.
So it's unfortunate because you look at the three like probably best mons on his team, and you look at Margiana, Hydreigon, Galvantula, and Tornadus. I know I mentioned 4, but still, there are 4 extremely good Pokemon. Like there are 4 Pokemon that could fit on the same team very, very well. However, he drafted to surround it Politoed, Mega Swampert, Beartick, Silvally Ghost, Weezing, Ludicolo, and Delphox. So one thing we don't notice is that he doesn't have any hazard removal. Like he can't remove a hazard from the side of the field at all in no fashion. And he also has a team that's decently weak to hazards. Hydreigon doesn't want to take the 12% from rocks. Galvantula is weak to it. Politoed will often run rest to try to compensate that rocks that the 12% it takes from rocks and just damage in general. Beartix doesn't want to take it. Tornadus gets regenerator, but it still comes on the field at 75%. Silvally doesn't want to take it. Weezing doesn't want to take it. Same for Ludicolo and Delphox. So he has a very team that is weak to rocks, even though like they're not rock weakness. He just doesn't want to take the hazard, and he doesn't have a way to remove it. So that was something that caught her eye right off the bat. And his team is very dependent on rain. Tornadus can be run outside of rain, obviously. But just having Mega Swampert as your Mega, it might not be the best Mega to draft, because like outside of rain, it doesn't do much. Like a good grass type can deal with it very well. And Politoed, like, yes, it's a good Pokemon, but it's not something you want to bring every week. And with this team, you're kind of forced to bring it every week, since like you're so dependent on rain, it can be easy to counter.
In addition to the lack of hazard removal, there's not very good hazard setting options. The only thing on this team that gets Stealth Rock is Mega Swampert, and it's really hard to want to waste a move slot on Mega Swampert, because Mega Swampert in the rain is definitely a force to be reckoned with, but if you have to set up rocks, that's one less coverage option you can have. That's, not bringing Rain Dance on your Swampert in case you can't bring Politoed or something along those lines. So if you have to bring Stealth Rock, then you're pretty much limited to Dual Stab and Ice Punch or Rain Dance or something along those lines, which is going to be rough if the Star Raptors want to play the Hazard game, because Hazards is a huge part of League format. You see so many people emphasizing the Hazard stacking strategy. One of the good things I can say about the Star Raptors, though, is that they're one of the only teams, if not the only team, I'm not sure off the top of my head, that has access to Sticky Web. So if they can pull off the good Rain team with Galvantula setting up Sticky Webs, Politoed setting up the Rain, and then things like Mega Swampert, Beartick, and Tornadus putting in work, even Ludicolo, things like that putting in work, this team is definitely a force to be reckoned with. However, that's a very situational thing, and there's a lot of scenarios where Rain doesn't work against your opponent's team, like for example if you're facing a Sand team. And Rain is also really easy to prep for because your opponent just has to slap Thunder on something and there goes your Tornadus. So this is definitely one of the more difficult teams to utilize, and that's why we have it placed at number 10.
Exactly. It doesn't have great speed either. Like I said, it's very dependent on Rain. His fastest mon is Tornadus T, which is really fast, but the rest of his team is really not fast at all. So if you bring a lot of hazards, you don't have to prep for removal because he doesn't have a setter except Mega Swampert, and you bring something to counter Rain, and you're pretty much good to go against this team. So let's move on to number 9. As number 9, we have the Anastor City Agrons. The Anastor City Agrons on their roster has Kyurem Black, Mega Aggron, Arcanine, Xurkitree, Tentacruel, Flygon, Braviary, Reuniclus, Cofagrigus, Exploud, and Golem.
So this team has Kyurem Black, and Kyurem Black is a massive threat in the format just because if you think you have a switch into Kyurem Black, you're wrong. However, this team doesn't really have a core. It doesn't have a fairy type to complete a fairy dragon steel core, and it doesn't have a grass type to complete a fire water grass core with Arcanine and Tentacruel. It's a pretty significant, or I wouldn't say significant, but alarming fighting weakness with Exploud and Golem and Kyurem Black, and Aggron's not really necessarily a fighting weakness. But your best answers to it are Reuniclus and Cofagrigus and Tentacruel to an extent, which forces things like Reuniclus and Cofagrigus to come every week, because a lot of teams have very good fighting types, particularly the Colorado Reggies that has 4 very good fighting types. There's a weakness to Dragon because of the lack of fairy typing, and really your only answer to an opposing Dragon type is Mega Aggron. That forces Mega Aggron to switch in constantly, and Mega Aggron lacks recovery, which is a huge issue for Mega Aggron in general. And the fact that it has to switch into so much to deal with so many weaknesses on this team, that's kind of an issue. In addition, the speed isn't very good on this team as well. I believe the fastest thing is Flygon at base 100. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it is.
No, you're right.
So Flygon and Tentacruel tied at base 100 for the fastest things on this team, which isn't necessarily the greatest thing in the world either.
Yeah, exactly. One thing that thought was decent, and maybe the reason it's above the other 3 teams, that it has decent hazards control and it has decent bulk. Like his bulk is pretty good in Mega Aggron, Arcanine, Tentacruel, Reuniclus, Cofagrigus, but and he also has a very good hazards control in Flygon and Tentacruel. Like they're both very good defoggers and rapid spinners themselves. So that's something that maybe put it above the other 3 teams.
All right, we ready to move on?
Yes, we are.
So next up at number 8 is the Mesquite Mesprits. Their lineup is Jirachi, Landorus Therian, Alolan Muck, Jolteon, Kyurem, Hitmonlee, Dodrio, Mesprit, Volcarona, Kabutops, and Mega Gyarados.
So again, the first thing that caught our eyes is that it doesn't deal well with hazards. Like it doesn't have good hazards removal. It has Hitmonlee and Kabutops has their spinner, and it doesn't have a defogger. Or maybe the trio gets it, but I'm not too sure. But
I checked.
It does not. All right. So like Hitmonlee and Kabutops are his only spinners, and they're obviously not Pokemon you bring every game. And even if you bring them, like they're not the fastest Pokemon, which can get the rapid speed like instantly when it comes in. So like that was something that caught our eyes. It has bad walls and bad bulk overall. Obviously, Jirachi and Lando can be very, very bulky themselves, especially with Intimidate. Muck has very good speed F, but the rest of his team, like there's no walls. Like there's nothing that walls stuff. Like, it's obviously a very offensive team, but like he doesn't have a switch in for anything. So he's going to have to play very, very, very well with the opposing offensive threats. And that's just like two things that caught our eyes on the bad side or on the critical side.
One of the things I can praise about the Mespritz is that it's definitely a very hyper-offensive heavy team. And hyper-offense is definitely a very viable strategy if your opponent lacks bulk. You can out-offense their offense and potentially pick up the W in that particular scenario. But it's, in fact, this team has the highest average attack stat at 110 over all the other teams. The next one, I believe, having 108, and that would be the Chicago Grand Bulls. So it's a very high average attack stat, and it has really good speed to support the offense in base 100 Jirachi, base 95 Kieran, base 130 Jolteon. Hitmonlee is 87, but that gets super boosted with the potential of Unburden. 110 Dodrio, 100 Volcarona, plus it can easily get up to +1 if you can set up a Quiver Dance. But this is a very difficult team to use just because it relies entirely on offense. Like, there's very few switch-ins to things other than Jirachi and Landorus, and Muck to an extent. But if those are your only three walls and they constantly have to be switching into opposing Pokemon, that's going to be an issue for this team.
Yes, if then again, like looking at an opposing perspective, if you can out-offense his offense or out-bulk his offense, you're pretty much good to go. You set up a ton of hazards, it doesn't have good removal, you deal with his hazard removal, and you just out-bulk or out-offense his offense. His offense is hard to out-offense, but it's still doable, and out-bulk his offense is also doable. Like Jirachi, there's some counters to it. Same for Lando. Like, there's scary mons, but there's still counters to it. Same for Jolteon. Same for Dodrio, even though it got buffed a lot this gen. Volcarona is a bit harder, but still like so weak to rock. And Gyarados takes 25 before Mega Evolving and doesn't appreciate the 12 after Mega Evolving. And there's some pretty good counters to that. So he has a very offensive team, but he has threats that can be, like, they're obviously threats, but they can be dealt with. So that's why we placed it at number 8.
All right, placing at number 7 is the Baltimore O'Reillys. Their lineup is Celesteela, Tapu Bulu, Alolan Marowak, Nidoqueen, Vaporeon, Aselgor, Zoroark, Rhydon, Hitmonchan, Manectric, and Mega Latias.
One thing that we notice about the O'Reillys is that it has like really, really good bulk. Like, the bulk on his team is absolutely insane. Like, it's very, very well. And he obviously drafted Celesteela number 1, and I think he did like everything in his like power to try to support Celesteela very, very well. And I think he did, like, we both think that he did a very good job at that. He supports Celesteela really, really well, and he has awesome bulk. One thing on the downside is that he doesn't have much great offense. Like, yes, Celesteela can be offensive, but his biggest offensive threat is Tapu Bulu, which doesn't have the best speed, and Marowak, that also has even worse speed. So Nidoqueen can be offensive as well, but yes, like, Nidoqueen is very versatile and it's a very good pick, but if you look at the rest, it's not that offensive. Like, Excelgor can be offensive, but still Zoroark, like, yes, it's offensive, but it's not the biggest threat. Mega Latias is a massive threat, so that's like, his offense pretty much relies on a few Pokemon that, if you have the right tools to deal with them, like, you can deal with them.
Hazard removal is another issue for the O'Reillys, just because he has a spinner in Hitmonchan and a Defogger in Mega Latias, and Hitmonchan is not something you'd bring every week, and wasting a move slot for Defog on Mega Latias could be potentially game-changing. The fact that you don't have that extra cover mover, you can't run Roost, you can't run Calm Mind setup or something along those lines, really hinders Mega Latias from being a true threat. The fact that it will usually have to have Defog if the O'Reillys want to prevent hazards, that could be a huge issue. Another thing that is a bit concerning is the ice weakness. Celesteela is a great Pokemon, don't get me wrong, but one of the bad sides about drafting Celesteela is that you have a Steel type that doesn't resist ice. Draft things like Tapu Bulu and Rhydon and Mega Latias that are weak to ice, and Nidoqueen as well. And your only answers to it are Alolan Marowak and Vaporeon. That could be potentially dangerous for teams that have very good ice types. For example, when you're facing stuff like Kieran Black, this team is really going to struggle. Its offensive capabilities are okay, just because it's obviously its strongest offensive Pokemon is Tapu Bulu, as Blue Victini mentioned. But other than that, it's not really that impressive. There's some good speed on this team. I will praise it for that as well. It has a Selgor, which was the second fastest Mon that ended up being drafted, other than somebody had the balls to draft Ninjask, which was impressive. So a Selgor is lightning fast, has access to spikes as well. It's a great pick for this team, in my opinion. There's Manectric at 105, Megalodios at 110, and then there's kind of this, or Zoroark, I believe, at 105 or something like that.
Yes.
And then there's kind of just like a little bit of a drop off in speed. Like there's nothing in between the base 100 mark and like base like 80-ish. So that could be an issue for this team as well, with the bad speed tiering.
So yeah, one thing we mentioned like about this, even though it has like great speed and bad speed tier, is something like Hydreigon can just put a Life Orb, go Modest, and go ham on this team. Obviously, he has a Fairy, but like it can be dealt with. So that was one example that we considered for that. One thing that puts this team above the others was that if you look at it in general, it's a tough team to prep for. Like, it's definitely a difficult team to prep for. You have to deal with Solistila, you have to deal with Tapu Bulu, which has massive offensive presence. Nidoqueen is not an easy mount to prep for because it's so versatile. Vaporeon, is not versatile, but you still have to deal with it because it's most likely going to come and it's so bulky. Excelgor could be a hazard stacking lead. Zoroark is like extremely difficult to not to prep for, but in games the mind games are real. Rhydon and Machamp and Manectric aren't that big of a deal, but Megalodios is a big threat to prep for. So like his team as an opponent perspective is tough to prep for.
All right.
So we're gonna move on with the number 6, which is the Dewford Drapion. The Dewford Drapion's roster is Manaphy, Mega Pidgeot, Nidoking, Entei, Serena, Sylveon, Mismagius, Metagross, Como-O, Honchkrow, and Alolan Raichu, excuse me.
So one thing we definitely noticed that was really good about this team is it has really good cores, a very good Fire, Water, Grass core in Manaphy, Entei, and Serena, and a really good Fairy Dragon Steel core in Sylveon, Metagross, and Como-O. The Ice weakness and Ghost weakness are a little bit concerning, but a lot of teams have weaknesses to Ice and Ghost. Like, those are really hard weaknesses to patch up. I would say the most significant weakness would be Ghost, because at this point the Ghost resists are Honchkrow and Mega Pidgeot. Those are the Ghost answers, and there's a lot of Ghost weaknesses in Raichu and Metagross, and what's the other one? Oh, and Mismagius, of course.
Mismagius.
Another poor thing about this team is that the hazard removal options are a little bit iffy. I mean, Serena gets Rapid Spin, but it's not the best Rapid Spinner in the world, and Mega Pidgeot and Honchkrow are technically defoggers, but running defog on those things is not very common, nor is it very viable. So that could be a real issue for the Dewford Drapions.
Yes, also one thing we noticed, he doesn't have good setters either. He has Nidoking as setters, which if you want to run offensive, might not have the place for Stealth Rocks. His move pool is really, really good. And Metagross. I do think that most of the time his setter will be Metagross, because like that will be his mount to resist ice and be there on more the bulky side. But if you want to run an Assault Vest set to counter like a big dragon types, you're not going to be able to run Stealth Rock that week. So that was one of the concerning things. However, on the good side, beside his good cores, I like the speed tier on this team. Like, he has Manaphy at 100, he has Mega Pidgeot at 121, he has Nidoking at 85, he has Entei at Adamant 100, he has Mismagius at 105, he has Como-O, I believe, at 90.
80, I think.
I'm not sure. 80?
80, I believe.
It's still a decent speed, and Alolan Marowak at 110. So he has like different speed tiers that forces his opponent to mostly run Jolly or Timid. So that's one of the things I liked about this team.
Agreed. We already talked about the rocks. We already talked about the spin. Something that is also really interesting that not a lot of teams can say that they have is access to Toxic Spikes with Nidoking as well. So that just really helps Nidoking to be very versatile. So that's why we placed the Drapions at number 6.
Yeah, I like the combination of offense and defense on this team.
All right, so moving on to number 5, we have the Jersey Weaviles. Their roster is Victini, Weavile, Zygarde 10% form, Fortress, Greninja, Gliscor, Lantern, Comfey, Archeops, Virizion, and Mega Manectric.
So obviously, you look at this team like, and you read it once, and you're like, holy crap, that team is so fast. Like, this team is insanely fast. Weavile at 125, Zygarde at 110, Greninja at 122, I believe. Lantern at, oh, just kidding. But Archeops at 110, Virizion at 108, Manectric at 135. So he has like insane speed on this team, and he also has great offense to support his speed. Like, it's not a fast team that doesn't provide offense. It also has great offense. Like, Victini is like awesome power. Weavile is great power. Greninja, maybe a little bit less, but with the Life Orb and Hydro Pump, it's still nothing to laugh at. And Virizion as well, maybe a little less, but Mega Manectric is really good and can just full switch around. So like, he has like very fast team and very great offense.
Definitely agreed. But of course, coming with a very offensive and fast team, this team struggles to find good walls. It has Gliscor, it has Fortress, it has Lantern, it has Comfey. And those 4 mons can generally cover the offensive or the wall bases, but teams that have good offense that could break through those mons, this team is really going to struggle against. There's 2 very obvious weaknesses to ice coming from Zygarde and Gliscor, and in addition to having an ice weakness with Archeops and Virizion. And the only ice resists, I believe, are Victini and Lantern that are viable. I mean, technically, Weavile and Fortress are ice resists, but
and
Greninja too. My mistake. But Fortress does not want to catch an ice beam. Fortress can take icicle crashes for days, but there's a lot of good special ice type that is going to run through this team because of the lack of ice resist. You're pretty much forced to bring Lantern and what was the other one I said? Lantern and Victini every week, even though Victini is probably coming every week. But if you're really afraid of those ice types, Lantern is going to be a bit of a issue or the fact that Lantern has to come so often is going to be a bit of an issue.
Yes, one thing also we noticed, it doesn't deal well with fairies. Like, his only fairy resist is Fortress and Victini. And Victini, you might not want to bring bulky every week, and Fortress is 4 times weak to fire and doesn't have that great offensive capabilities. So that was one thing we considered. He doesn't have that great hazard removal. He has Fortress in Rapid Spin and Gliscor. If you want to lose the poison heal, you can run Defog, but that's not the most optimal set, obviously. And he has a very weak team to hazards. Like, Victini really doesn't appreciate hazards. Same as Weavile. Same as Manectric. So he obviously has like a lot of things that doesn't appreciate the 25 or the 12 from hazard. So that was one thing we considered. And he also has few skull switches. So Lantern, that's not coming every week, is a very good skull switch in. But besides that, like, if Virizion is offensive, it's not going to want to take the skull burn. Archeops doesn't want to take the skull burn. Manectric, it's not that great bulky if it's coming from an offensive Pokemon. So it doesn't have that great skull switches. But we placed it at number 4 because we really like the power of this team, and we think, like, even though it lacks wall and stuff, we think that offense like this could work. Moving on to number 4, the Connecticut Crocodiles. The Connecticut Crocodiles roster is Lando I, Mew, Mega Altaria, Cobalion, Seismitoad, Rotom Eat, Salazzle, Togekiss, Gourgeist, Sneasel, and Miltank.
So the very first thing we noticed about this team that is a bit concerning is the lack of hazard removal. You're pretty much limited to Defog on Togekiss and Defog on Mew. And if Mew is one of your only 2 hazard removals, that's a huge issue because that prevents Mew from doing things offensively. What Mew is really good at in the format is the fact that it can do just about anything. But the fact that it's probably going to have to run Defog a lot kind of lowers the intimidation factor for Mew as well. One thing this team did really well, though, is it has a lot of options for setting up rocks. It has Landorus, it has Cobalion, Seismitoad, Miltank, and Mew, of course, as well. So there's a lot of different things that could set up hazards. So the opponent is really going to have to prep for all the potential things that could set up hazards, because obviously if something's setting up a hazard, it's lacking some kind of coverage move that the opponent could think that is there. So there's a lot of versatility when it comes to setting up hazards on this team as well.
Yes, one thing that that we absolutely loved about his team is the versatility. Everything is versatile on this team. It can be run offensive, defensive, physically offensive, physically defensive. Like, it's so good. Obviously, Lando I has his, like, we recognize it as his offensive capability or his setting up option in Rock Polish, Calm Mind, or Bulk Up. But Mew can pretty much literally do anything. Mega Altaria, physically offensive with Dragon Dance, physically defensive, specially defensive, physically offensive. Cobalion can be hazards, hazard setter, assault vest, just physically defensive, offensive with Life Orb. Seismitoad, set of procs, immune to Scald, just offensive even though it doesn't have that great speed. It's just a great water type in general. Rotom Heat, offensive or defensive, it's absolutely amazing. Salazzle pretty much will run the same thing, but you know, that's why it's a later pick. Togekiss, same thing, can be run offensive, Scarf, specially defensive, physically defensive, etc. Same with Miltank, and he obviously has Gourgeist and Sneasel that pretty much will do the same thing, but obviously have versatility on their own. So that was something that we absolutely loved about this team, was the versatility. However, it doesn't deal well with fairies. Like, obviously, Lando I is an awesome fairy checks with Sludge Wave, Sheer 4 boosted with Life Orb, but Mega Altaria doesn't appreciate fairies at all. Cobalion, which is his Teal type, doesn't resist fairy. Rotom Heat that resists fairy can't really do much to it. Obviously, Salazzle is a great answer to fairy, but it's 4-time weak to ground, and it's not very bulky. And Sneasel doesn't deal well with fairies, and Togekiss and Gourgeist and Miltank doesn't really care, but you know, a bulky fairy can outbulk them. So that was one of the concerns on this team.
Overall, it's number 4 for a reason. We really like the versatility on this team. We really like its offensive capabilities. We really like its defensive capabilities. We like the fact that it could do a little bit of everything.
Yeah, very unpredictable team to prep for.
So, moving on to the top 3. At number 3, we have the Chicago Grand Bulls. Their team is Tapu Koko, Skarmory, Volcanion, Mamoswine, Mega Garchomp, Hitmontop, Tornadus Eye, Drapion, Azelf, Dusclops, and Ninjask.
So obviously we're looking at it at his hazard perspective. His hazards is really good. He has Skarmory to set up rocks and spikes. He has Mamoswine to set up rocks. He has Mega Garchomp to set up rocks, which, you know, might not be the best thing, but still. He has Drapion for toxic spikes. So that was something we really liked. We didn't like that this team was weak to electric and had electric terrain on their team. So that might be a concern. Yes, he has 2 solid ground type, but a good electric type that could take advantage of the electric terrain could be an issue for this team. But overall, like, the cores on this team is absolutely great with Koko, Skarmory, and Mega Garchomp, who isn't the best Mega, but obviously Mega Garchomp allowed him to pick like big threats, like also Volcanion, Mamoswine, Azelf. So like, we just like the general look of his team, and the fact that like his P tier is also very good. Like, it doesn't have a bunch of mons at the same speed. He has Koko at 130. He has Mamoswine at 80, Garchomp at above 90, Tornadus over 100, Azelf at 115. So his speed tier on his team is really good. So
Blue mentioned the speed tiers, and even the things that are slow really appreciate that Ninjask support. I mean, Ninjask is a very key member of this team, regardless of the fact that it's not a very good Pokemon normally, but it's lightning fast, base 160 speed, the fastest thing in the game other than speed form Deoxys, I believe. Excluding Megas as well, I believe. But still, it's very fast and has access to Speed Boost Baton Pass. So things like Volcanion and Mamoswine and Mega Garchomp that typically aren't very fast appreciate Speed Boost. And they're bulky enough to get up a few Speed Boosts, switch into them, take a hit, maybe lose like 40% or something like that from a neutral hit, and then proceed to put in some work because they're so fast now. There's a lot of offensive capability from this team, particularly from Tapu Koko and Volcanion and Mamoswine and Mega Garchomp. And those typings really cover your bases very well. There's a lot of options for hazard setup as well, but in addition, there's 2 really good hazard removal options with Defog, Skarmory, and Rapid Spin Hitmontop. And Ninjask technically gets Defog, but if that's your Defogger that week, that's an issue. But it covers a lot of the weaknesses very well for the most part, other than Electric. That's why we have this team at number 3. I really like this team.
Yeah, and the bulk on his team is actually really good with Skarmory, Mega Garchomp, which can be run bulky, Hitmontop that has access to Intimidate, Drapion, which is physically bulky, is decent, and Dusclops is just a wall. Very, very passive, but still a good wall to put on this team, since like the overall look of his team is very, very dangerous, so people might not expect a Dusclops to come. At number 2, we have the Detroit Red Wingulls. The Detroit Red Wingulls roster is Excadrill, Nihilego, Megaladios, Snorlax, Electros, Tangrowth, best mon in the game, Granbull, Gastrodon, Combusken, Frostlass, and Tyranitar.
So you see Tyranitar, you see Excadrill, you see, it's just the copy-paste Sandrush drill team. But this is actually a really interesting sand team because it incorporates the idea of Nihilego. And Nihilego in the sand became one of the best special walls in the game, just like that. There's a lot of really good cores on this team, particularly the Firewater Grass core is a bit mediocre, but Tangrowth and Gastrodon are both awesome Pokemon. Combusken, that's more of a gimmick Pokemon, so it's not necessarily a great fire type to complete that core. But still, there's a lot of really good defensive capabilities. It covers his weaknesses really well. I mean, you draft Excadrill and Nihilego for top 2 picks. Obviously, those share a pretty significant ground weakness. So you pick up things like Megaladios, you pick up things like Electros, you pick up things like Tangrowth to patch up those weaknesses, and it works out really well. There is still a slight ground weakness and a little bit of a concerning water weakness on this team, but other than that, this team is looking very good.
Yes, just the presence of Excadrill, Nihilego, Megaladios, Snorlax, Tangrowth, Gastrodon, Tyranitar is just a hard team to prep for, and it just looks great in general. Like you mentioned, like the core is absolutely amazing. Granbull is not the best fairy to finish up the Excadrill Megaladios score, but he still has a lot of threat on its team. Doesn't have great hazard removal. Don't get me wrong, Excadrill is debatably the best spinner in the format, but if someone has a good spin blocker, Megaladios might not be the way to go for defog. So like that was one of the concern, but obviously Excadrill being that good of a spinner that it is, we didn't consider that much in our ranking. He still has great core, great team in general. Like the bulk on his team is absolutely great in Nihilego, Snorlax, Electros, Tangrowth, Granbull, Gastrodon, and the offensive presence in Excadrill, Megaladios, Nihilego, Snorlax, even Granbull that has 120 attack, but it's a bit slow. Tyranitar, just the general overall look of this team looks really, really solid.
Agreed 100%. Tyranitar and Excadrill is a very scary combo, and I feel like this team has the team to support the ground, or the potential for sand.
And it has Tangrowth as the best mon in the game,
exactly.
So we had to put it that high.
Tangrowth is pretty awesome, not gonna lie. Alright, so the number 1 team in our opinion is the New York Cosmogs. The Cosmog lineup is Tapu Lele, Garchomp, Delmise, Rotom Wash, Emboar, Pelipper, Almastar, Mega Scizor, Skuntank, Meloetta, and Cryogonal.
So the first thing is he has arguably the best mon in the format in Tapu Lele. The power of this thing is really, really good. And he completed it with such a good core in Garchomp and Mega Scizor. They're not mediocre dragon and steel type. They're actually all 3 of them are excellent fairy dragon and steel type. So that one was one of the things. He has also Emboar, Delmise, and Rotom Wash to complete the fire, water, grass core, which are also 3 really, really good Pokemon for their typing. So obviously, if we look at how he drafted this Pokemon, he wanted to complete his core very, very quickly, and he patched up his fire weakness with a lot of water types, and mainly Pelipper as a range setter. And the range setting on his team is very interesting. Yes, it patches up well the Mega Scizor and the Dhelmise fire type, but he doesn't have to bring Pelipper every game, and that's what I like about his team. He can bring Rotom Wash as his water type one week, and then bring Pelipper and then shut down water type. Like bring Pelipper another week and shut down water type. Like he has a very versatile team. Garchomp, which can be run like offensive or defensive. Same thing with Dhelmise and Rotom. Hambor, which is not the best bulk, but it's still decent switching to some stuff, like steel types and all. Pelipper to set up range. He has Omastar, which is very interesting on this team because it can be set as hazards suicide lead, but also like as a shell smash sweeper in the range. So like the overall look of this team was really good.
One thing this team did very well as well is hazard control. One really viable spinner and Cryogonal. But Dhelmise is a terrific spinner, and there's 3 really good defoggers as well in Mega Scizor, Skuntank, and Pelipper. Obviously, Mega Scizor hates the fact that it could potentially be running defog. Like, defog Mega Scizor is not great, but it's still a pretty good defogger because it's not weak to rocks. But I feel like he brings out the defensive capabilities of Scizor and the offensive capabilities of Scizor. He does that with a lot of Pokemon, particularly Scizor, Garchomp, Tapu Lele, and Omastar. Hazard setting, he has Garchomp, which is one of the best rock setters in the game, and he has Omastar, which gets rocks, spikes, and toxic spikes. It and Fortress and technically Smeargle are the only Pokemon that can say that they do that. So overall, I really like this team, and I think it's the best team that was drafted.
Yeah, the synergy is just really good. The cores are like insanely good. Like the versatility is also really good. Like it's such a tough team to prep with because to prep for as an opponent perspective. You have to prep for Lele, Garchomp, Rotom Wash, Ambor, the Rain, Mega Scizor, Meloetta, which is just an insane specially defensive wall. So like it's a tough team to prep for, and the versatility of his team is actually really good. Yes, he does have like 3 water type, but like he has Dhelmise and Ambor and Mega Scizor to compensate that. Even Skuntank has a good poison type. So those were the things that made us like chose it as number 1.
It's a pseudo rain team. Like it doesn't have to rely on the rain, but it's really good in the rain as well. That's honestly, I think I'm in love with this team. I'm sorry, it's really good.
Yeah, it's really good. He doesn't have to bring Pelipper every week, and like I said, like he can just bring it and cut something by surprise with the shell smashing Omastar or something. Yeah. So this team looks like really solid.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, that is our post-draft power rankings for the UPC Season 3, the first season in Gen 7. If you did like this video, a subscription to the UPC channel would be much appreciated. We'll have power rankings coming out on a regular basis. In addition, there's a couple more series that some more analysts are doing. I don't know them off the top of my head. But nonetheless, we do hope you guys did enjoy these power rankings. Let us know your opinions down in the comment section if you guys have different opinions on the rankings of this team. But this has been Eric and Blue signing off.
Bye-bye.